Hello again. You're watching EASD TV, and what we thought we'd do now is take you behind the scenes. Now, some of you may have wondered why particular sessions get into the press and why, conversely, others don't get into the press. Well, with me now is Tony Kirby, and Tony Kirby is the mastermind behind the media at the EASD Congress. So, first of all, what do you do, Tony?
Thanks, Viv. Well, my job starts well before the Congress, and it's essentially this. I get to see all of the 900 or so abstracts that we have accepted for the meeting, and I have to painfully go through every single one of them and shortlist them into a selection that the media might like to see in the news. And sometimes they're not the ones you might expect, as you just alluded to. There's a mixture of heavy science ones, new drug studies, and also some weird and wonderful things that might attract the attention of the press, which might not necessarily be, major life-changing things in diabetes, but they'll still get the meeting into the news. So it's a mixture of all of those things.
So, for example, today and yesterday we've been seeing a lot of press coverage about how drinking tea might reduce the risk of diabetes.
Yeah, so the tea study has been very big. I've got actually brought along a little list of where it's been covered, and just to explain a little bit, tea actually came out. We did also this year, for the first time, a series of early releases, which were not actually on the day of the Congress, and tea was one of those. And we actually released that to the Sunday press, which was also an experiment. And it's been picked up very widely across, initially across the UK, and then it's spread to the US. So it's been covered on CNN, CBS, NBC over in America, The Guardian online, Daily Mail online, plus a whole range of European consumer and medical press. So it's been one of our biggest studies, and it essentially it was a meta-analysis of existing studies showing that if you drank 4 cups of tea or more a day, your risk of diabetes...
Which of course all Brits do, by the way.
I've certainly been drinking that many during this week. That it could reduce the risk of developing diabetes by 17%. And the author is Chinese. Sadly, she wasn't able to make it due to visa restrictions, so she's recorded her presentation, and it's number 281, if anyone wants to take a look.
But the thing that's interesting about that, and I know that a lot of you are going to be squeaking about this watching it, is that people will say, well, that's a meta-study. Lots of people could say there are lots of confounders there. For instance, if it simply might be that people who drink tea are not drinking fizzy drinks, for example. And that might be the confounder. But why is it that the press always go for what I guess our audience here of diabetologists might think are the trivial things, whilst the really important things perhaps go unreported?
Well, it's not always the case. It's like obviously we're as you know, with your career in this industry, we're the victims of the news agenda of the day, and sometimes you get lucky. Often, in this particular instance, we experimented with releasing to the Sunday press the day before the meeting started, and that was because Sunday press often get a hard time. They never get access to Congress stories because a lot of them don't go over a Sunday. So this was an experiment in that way as well. So they were just all the things came together to make it get picked up. But in terms of them covering only the more serious studies, it's not necessarily the case, because you mentioned semaglutide, the obesity and diabetes drug. We also issued that before the conference and the week before the conference, and that got major pickup, and it's about reducing a person's 10-year risk of developing diabetes, and that got widely covered around the world as well, English press, European press.
Now that's a very interesting media coverage in itself, because we've been talking a lot here about the stigma of diabetes. Mm-hmm. And yet what we see is both the press reporting, the real significance of semaglutide in treating obesity and in preventing diabetes and its complications. But on the other hand, they're also reporting widely the recreational use, if I can put it that way, of semaglutide by people who aren't obese and who are using it as a diet drug. And that kind of encourages the whole stigma thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously obviously the official guidelines around that drug are to combine it with lifestyle and diet interventions. I mean, clearly there's going to be a section of society that may turn to it as an easy fix, for want of a better expression, but it's up to doctors and health teams to make sure that doesn't happen, and make sure the drug's used correctly. It should be used with diet and exercise, as I understand it.
I'm going to ask you a question that you and I both know the answer to, but okay. I want our audience to hear it.
Sure.
Why is media coverage important for the EASD Congress?
Yes, well, that's the $1 million question. So obviously, the media coverage drives, a vibe for the event. It raises interest around the world. It takes it to audiences that maybe aren't too familiar with the meeting. Ultimately, we hope it will encourage scientists in various parts of the world, because it is a truly global meeting, to come and register. For example, this Chinese tea study, it might not change the world, but it's going to have a big impact in China, and maybe it'll encourage more Chinese delegates to be able to come and register next year, perhaps when their COVID restrictions are over. But it's got, when studies go around the world like that, and each time they contain the words annual meeting of the European Association for the Study of Diabetes, it raises the profile of the meeting, makes people take notice, makes them maybe want to be part of the meeting. It's an impossible number to quantify, of course, but as long as it's on the whole positive coverage and coverage of the studies, it can only be a good thing for the profile of the meeting.
And of course there's a much bigger aspect to this, which is that it gets diabetes out into the media in a way that actually the public can appreciate.
Yeah.
And it's an opportunity to get diabetes right up there and on the front pages, and in people's living rooms through broadcast as well, in a way that actually wouldn't be possible otherwise. And just for the scientists among you, and I'm going to say to this to you directly, is that if your paper is picked up by the media, your citations improve dramatically, and there's a lot of evidence, a lot of published evidence to support that.
Yeah, and of course, that's the other side of things. We couldn't do the press releases or the media program without the help of the researchers. You're quite right, and hopefully they get an accolade. They'll get a boost at their university or their institution, and we try to make it as positive an experience as possible. And obviously, then they'll be happy to, if they have another study next year, they'll be happy to do it again, and their confidence grows in transmitting their own messages. So that is a very important factor that we should talk about more as well.
So the guidelines, the consensus statement on management of hypertension and type 2, we think is going to get a good pickup. And what about the other stories? What has had a lot of press? I mean, we've said the tea story, but what else?
Sure. So we've also had some, we also hold press conferences that have been on Zoom this year to raise interest in some of the studies that we've got covered this week. And actually, we allow for oral presentations, the media to cover it on the same day as the presentation is going to be given. So we've actually had some coverage in Bloomberg News today of 2 studies about COVID possibly being linked to development of type 1 diabetes in children. One of those is by Hannah Lovdell Gulseth and German Tapia from the Norwegian Institute of Health, and the other by Helen Colquhoun from the University of Edinburgh. And that session is actually happening today at, I think it's 10:30 in the Doniach Hall. So if anyone's interested in that, they can actually go and see those sessions. And one study concludes that the COVID isn't linked to risk of type 1 diabetes, and the other one concludes that it does. So
Marvelous.
There's going to be an interesting debate about that. Also today, Roy Taylor, the Retune study, and his colleague Alison Barnes, that's abstract number 255. They were talking about each person having a personal fat threshold, because many people with type 2 diabetes, a significant proportion, about 1 in 6, are in a normal weight category, and those people aren't advised to lose weight routinely because doctors feel the diabetes must be caused by other factors. Well, this study by Roy Allison and colleagues shows that if they lose weight, they can go into remission
They
as
can
well.
benefit too.
So even though they're of a normal weight, if they lose some of that normal weight, they can go into remission.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Tony. I mean, you are a very important part of this Congress, not just for the researchers and clinicians that are here, but actually for the people living with diabetes right around the globe. So thank you for all you do.
Yeah.
So,
thanks a lot, Viv.
Very interesting insight into what goes on behind the scenes in our press rooms at the EASD. And there'll be more later. Bye for now.